Now, we'll turn to a different relationship between Şems-i Tebrizi and his predecessors. Dr. Takeshita Masataka from the Department of Islamic Studies, Faculty of Letters in the University of Tokyo will address the topic of Şems-i Tebrizi and the philosophers. Dr. Takeshita.
Başlamaktan önce Türk kadınlar kültür derneği ve özellikle Cemal Nur Hoca'ya çok davet için çok teşekkür ederim. Ve Şemseddin Hazreti Şemseddin Tabrizi ve Hazreti Mevlana Şafre Konya'ya ve Konya halkıya güneş doğan ülke olarak tanınan Japonya'dan çok selam söyleyeyim. Şems-i Tabrizi is generally considered as an uneducated wandering dervish who transformed an intellectual scholarly Rumi into an ecstatic poet. At first sight, Şems-i Tabrizi does not seem to have been interested in any religious sciences, let alone philosophy. However, in the Maqalat-i Şems, which is a random collection of his sayings in various occasions, he often drops names of the philosophers and narrates interesting episodes of some philosophers. In this paper, I will gather Şems's sayings concerning the philosophers in the Maqalat and clarify what kind of images he had toward the philosophers in general. Then I will throw some light on the enigmatic figure on Shihab Haliwa, who is almost unknown in other sources, but the most important philosopher in the Maqalat, by analyzing his character and philosophical doctrines depicted in the Maqalat. First of all, Şems-i Tabrizi was not an uneducated, illiterate dervish. He was one of those dervishes who abandoned their scholastic career and entered into the life of wandering dervishes like Eraghi, a Sufi poet. Before entering the life of dervishes, he had a scholastic career. He was a teacher of a Quranic school. He was educated in jurisprudence and theology. In one place, he says, "After all, I was a jurist. I read Tanbih, that means Tanbih fi Furur Shafiya by Abu Ishaq Shirazi, and other books many times." In one place, he was even called by others the logician, Mantiki, although he firmly denies this. In the ancient philosophers, in the Maqalat, the name of Aristotle is not mentioned, but the name of Plato is mentioned in several places. The most interesting place is as follows, I quote, "Ibn Sina was half a philosopher. The perfect philosopher was Plato. He called for love." Here it seems that Plato is more highly valued than Ibn Sina. In all other occurrences, the name of Plato is used only symbolically as a representative name for the philosophers. It is interesting to note that Plato, instead of Aristotle, is used by Şems for this purpose. In one place, it is said that the philosophers whose leader is Plato declared the superiority of the philosophers over the prophets as follows: "What Plato and his followers says, if everyone were like us, prophets would not be required, is rubbish." In another place, it is said that a single one of God's servants can empty the Plato of all those sciences. In this case, also Plato represents the great man of sciences. In another place, Socrates and Hippocrates are mentioned together with Ikhwan as-Safa as the representative names of the great men of sciences. And they are compared with the prophet and his family. I quote, "Otherwise, who would talk of Socrates, Hippocrates, the Ikhwan as-Safa, and the Greeks in the presence of Muhammad, the household of Muhammad, and the children of Muhammad's spirit and heart?" Islamic philosophers, Ibn Sina. Among Islamic philosophers, the name of Ibn Sina appears in 4 places. As has been already shown above, Ibn Sina was compared with Plato and was given a lower rank. In a very interesting episode, it is told that Muhammad Ghazali studied Ibn Sina's Isharat wa Tanbihat with Omar Khayyam. It is also said that Ghazali's Ihya Ulumuddin was criticized because in that book, Ghazali made deductions from the Isharat. Ghazali read the Isharat twice with Omar Khayyam, but still he couldn't understand it. It seems that Shams considered Muhammad Ghazali more as a scholar than a Sufi. In another place, he says as follows: Muhammad Ghazali, in the method of sciences, had no equal. His compositions are clearer than the sun. Maulana indeed knows this. Lastly, Ibn Sina's name was mentioned in relation to Shihab Hariwa, a contemporary philosopher and a close acquaintance of Shams, on whose accounts will be discussed later. It is said that Shihab did not show any respect to Ibn Sina. Sufrawardi Maktur. In the Makarat, Sufrawardi Maktur, the Shaykh al-Ishraq, appears once in a strange long narration of his tragic execution. In contrast to his low regard for Ibn Sina, Shams esteemed Sufrawardi highly. Shams concluded the narration of his death with the following remarks: his words swallowed down the words of Shihab Sufrawardi. Then that theologian Asad cursed him. How unjust of him. Here Sufrawardi Maktur was compared with the Sufi Shaykh Shihab Sufrawardi, the founder of Sufrawardi order. And the philosopher Sufrawardi was regarded superior to the Sufi Sufrawardi. It is interesting to note that in another place, Shams comments as follows concerning Shihab Nishapuri. This Shihab Nishapuri was much more excellent than Shaykh Shihab ad-Din. This Shihab Nishapuri must be the same as Shihab Hariwa, a aforementioned philosopher, friend of Shams. But both Shihab ad-Din Sufrawardi, the master of the Ishraqi order, Ishraqi school, and Shihab Hariwa, a mysterious philosopher, are compared with the same Sufi Sufrawardi and were regarded superior to him. It is possible that there might be some confusion between two Shihabs, Shihab ad-Din Sufrawardi and Shihab Hariwa. In one variant of the text, it is said that Sufrawardi talked about abandonment of following the religion of Muhammad. As has been seen in the account of Plato, the denial of religion is one of the stereotyped accusations made against the philosophers. Also, in the same place, it is said that for this Shihab ad-Din Sufrawardi, knowledge is more dominant than intellect. Fakhr ad-Din Razi. Next, Shihab Hariwa. Fakhruddin is the most frequently mentioned philosopher by Shams in the Makarat. Generally, Fakhruddin is not counted as a philosopher, but an Ashurite theologian. However, his theology was heavily influenced by philosophy, and he dealt with many philosophical issues. In the Makarat, he is said to be one of the philosophers, or something like that. In several places, Fakhruddin is depicted as a champion of intellectual sciences, the exact opposite of the Sufi way of knowledge. He reached the ultimate level of human knowledge, but finally realized the vainness of human intellectual efforts. This image of Fakhruddin agrees with the generally accepted image of Fakhruddin. It is widely believed that in his later age, Fakhruddin repented for having engaged in theology and rational sciences, and acknowledged the existence of higher knowledge beyond the sphere of intellectual sciences he perfected. A fragment of his famous poem, written in Arabic, which according to Sayyid Hussein Nasr is sufficient evidence for Fakhruddin's inclination for Sufism, is quoted in the Makarat in order to show the vainness of human intellectual pursuits. It is interesting to note that here the name of Fakhruddin was not mentioned, but he was referred to as the best of the investigators in the sciences. I omit the quotation and go to the next paragraph.